Hi, I'm Royce Morales. I'm a transformational facilitator and a spiritual teacher and a radio show host. And I'd like to talk to you today about emotions, particularly what happens when we suppress them. And I know a lot of people have learned in life that they have to suppress emotions. Emotions are bad and they make you look weak and silly and all of that stuff. And we watched Star Trek with Mr. Spock, and he was, the epitome of suppressed emotions. Um, in my own life, I learned very young that emotions were just not okay. My mother was an intellect, and everything was about being smart and logical. And whenever I would have emotions, she would just belittle me about them. And my dad, who was a lot more emotionally minded, but he learned that to survive his marriage, he had to suppress emotions as well. So I got a lot of messages about emotions and how bad they were. And I think things have changed a little bit in our society. I think that children nowadays are not taught as much to suppress emotions, but a lot of the parents have been suppressing them. So they're probably subconsciously giving that message out. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about what happens when we do suppress emotions. And hopefully you'll get inspired to stop suppressing them. And if you need some help with that, I talk a lot about that in my Perfect Life Awakening course. So reach out. So the first thing that happens when emotions are suppressed is something that I refer to as the seesaw effect. And I talk a lot about that in my course. I talk about how if you push down one side of a seesaw, the other side has to come up. The same thing with emotions. If I'm pushing down my emotions, they have to come up somewhere, whether it be physically inside of me or by the people that I live with. If I'm pushing down my anger, my husband might overact on his own anger because he's subconsciously feeling the energy of my anger when I'm pushing down, and he's acting on it. And that happens a lot. So take a look at what's being seesawed in your life. Whatever it is that you're pushing down is coming up somewhere. The other thing that happens is memory problems. So I find that emotions are part of our memory system. And if we're pushing down those emotions, we might find that we're not even remembering things that have happened to us because all the emotions have been disregarded and pushed away from that memory. The next thing that happens, I talk a lot about this, is exhaustion, especially all of a sudden you just feel tired and you don't know why, and you know you've had enough sleep. Something was triggered, the emotion that you have been pushing down was triggered, and all of a sudden you're exhausted because part of you is saying, no, I've got to push that down. And it's really tiring to push down emotions. It happens a lot. So if you find yourself just suddenly yawning for no apparent reason, it could be that something was triggered, and take a look at it. I talk a lot about that in my course because it's like this instant red flag. I find if I'm suddenly just going, and I kind of zone out and I start yawning and I feel tired, what is going on inside of me that just got triggered? So take a look at that. It's really important. Another thing that happens from suppressed emotions, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is you suddenly find yourself overreacting to things. It's like you get home and your partner didn't take the trash out like you asked him to, and you're just livid. So chances are it's not about the trash can being taken out, it's something else that got triggered. Maybe you're angry about something else and you were suppressing it all day at work, and then there you are, you're overreacting. I talk about the fact that chances are, if you're overreacting, they are reflecting something to you that you are in denial of about yourself. Take a look at some of the other videos I've done where I talk about mirrors, the mirror effect. So people are always showing us a part of ourselves that we just don't want to look at, that we have suppressed, especially our emotions. So that overreacting is a really good thing to look at. Another thing that happens from suppressed emotions is that we start to look at life through a lens of whatever it is that we are suppressing. So if I've gotten really good at suppressing my anger, I'm going to look around and that's all I'm going to see everywhere. I'm going to pick up a newspaper and see all the angry news, or I'm going to walk into a room and I'm going to just perceive anger everywhere I go. So take a look at that and see what the lens is that you are looking at life through. And it's really pretty amazing. Addictiveness. I'm not going to go into a whole lot about that, but a lot of times when people are suppressing emotions, they use substances to keep them down, whether it be food or alcohol or whatever it is. So they're pushing something down with those external substances. And needless to say, it doesn't work. And then we have one more reason to be pissed off at ourselves, because not only am I angry, but now I'm angry at myself for doing whatever it is that I'm doing that I'm addicted to. Another thing that happens is physical issues. I mentioned that briefly a couple of minutes ago, but physical issues, if you're pushing down emotions, they're going to show up in some physical way, whether a headache or ulcer, cancer. They're finding scientifically that a lot of diseases that we had no idea why they manifest in our body is because of what we have suppressed. All those emotions, the sadness, the anger, etc. Constipation. I'm just looking at my list here. Teeth clenching, headaches, and even wrinkles can be attributed to suppressing our emotions. So what do we do now that we know that we shouldn't suppress our emotions? Okay, let's let them all up. Well, it's probably a little bit harder than that, especially if you've been trained to believe that emotions are not your friend and you need to push them down. So what I talk about a lot in my courses is ways to get in touch with programming that you have about emotions so that you can start to let them out. It sounds a little scary, especially if you've been suppressing them your entire life, but they're not going to, just explode all of a sudden. Generally speaking, when people start to get in touch with emotions, they do start to slowly trickle out. So, that's really important. But I do find that there's probably some incidents where you bought into the notion that emotions are not okay. So what we do in my course is discover those incidents. And once you find where you bought into that and where you got programmed in that way, where you basically programmed yourself to decide that emotions are not okay, once you locate the roots of that, a lot of times things just kind of vanish and you're able to feel appropriately and not dramatically, etc. So what do we do in the meantime before you can take my course? I always tell people the best thing to do is to be aware, to be conscious, to be mindful of your emotions. You might have to kind of talk yourself through it. It's like, oh, that's anger that I'm feeling. Okay, so what is that really about? And to start asking yourself a little bit deeper questions. Let's do a scenario real fast. Let's talk about that terrible spouse of yours that didn't take the trash out. Poor guy. So you get home, you had asked your spouse to take the trash out, he didn't do it, and you're noticing that your body is starting to feel anger, your stomach is clenching, your heart is pounding, you're thinking, oh my gosh, why can't he just listen to me? So what you need to do in that situation is to start asking some questions. So what is the meaning behind that anger? What is it really about? Well, I'm disappointed and I feel like he doesn't listen to me. And, you start to notice those little kind of judgments and beliefs going on. And being conscious of that is at least half the battle, because it really probably has nothing to do with the trash. So what does that mean to me when I came home and he didn't do what I asked him to do? The next thing to do is to ask a little bit deeper. I talk a lot about this in my course, that whenever a button is pushed and you're feeling an emotion, you're feeling sadness, or you're feeling anger, it's all about really a fear that gets triggered. So what is the fear that got triggered from that situation? Well, I'm afraid that he's never going to listen to me. And I'm afraid that I married a stupid guy that doesn't care about me. And, so what is the fear? Then if you go a little bit deeper, you might discover that there's some kind of fear of losing love going on. Take a listen to an entire YouTube video where I talk about that, but just kind of basically, when a button gets pushed, it's some kind of a fear, and it's some kind of fear of losing love. So I'm afraid that my husband doesn't love me, or my spouse doesn't love me, my partner doesn't love me. And that's what's really going on. But go a little bit deeper. I know, get a big shovel out. It's probably really showing you fear of having love. I talk a lot about that in my course, that there's a part of us that is terrified of having love. So we subconsciously sabotage it. We subconsciously set up our lives so that we only allow ourselves to receive a certain amount of love. And when it starts to go a little bit more than that, it's terrifying to our fear-based consciousness, and we sabotage it on some subconscious level. So what I'm really afraid of is he does love me, even though he doesn't show it by taking the trash out. And there's a part of me that doesn't feel deserving of love from him. So I get really pissed off when he doesn't do what I ask him to do. That is a tough thing to admit. That's probably the toughest thing that I ask people to look at in my courses, because it's really scary to admit that, ooh, there's a part of me that doesn't feel deserving of love. But I do talk about where that comes from and why we feel that way, why we feel undeserving of love. So I hope that you have taken a look at your emotions a little bit more during this video, and how important it is to feel and get into the roots of whatever it is that's going on and see what it's about for you. I am available to work with you privately if you like, and check out my YouTube videos. I have a lot of them. And also, I have an e-course that you can kind of fool around with and see if it's something that you like. And again, thank you so much for listening. Please hit like and subscribe. You'll be notified of all the videos that I'm doing. And thank you so much. Let yourself feel.